All right, I think that I will take some time today to share with you some of my daughter's story. In this picture, you see my little grandchildren looking at their father's grave. Isn't that just the absolute saddest thing you ever look at? It absolutely breaks my heart. It was the hardest thing that we ever went through when I lost my little son-in-law, my daughter's husband. This is my baby daughter, my fourth daughter. So Daddy's gone, and it's an amazing story because after Damon died, I shared in the story earlier called God in the Details about, the timing, the miracles in the timing of his death, and how God had showed Damon before he died when he was concerned about his family. God said, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of your family." And then the young man that Damon died in the arms of the young man that would eventually marry my daughter. Well, the way they ended up getting together was he had heard on the grapevine. He knew of Damon and Audrey, but they didn't run in the same circles. And he was in his 30s. He was a single young man, and he kind of thought life had passed him by. All of his friends had families, were married, and but not him, And he kind of felt like he was, left out there in the cold. Unbeknownst to him, God had a plan for him, that he was going to have a wife and a family. But anyway, so Damon dies in his arms, and he had heard through the grapevine that Audrey could not get a true story about what happened to her husband. Nobody would tell her the truth. So he looked her up, or he started texting her, and he told her he'd be more than happy to share with her, Damon's death. So I think they met like at a restaurant, and then of course she got to hear the story of how her husband died, and she finally was able to be at peace. Well, from that point on, they just kind of became friends, and they texted with one another, and then one thing leads to another, and before you know it, he's asking her out. So, and this was so interesting because just before, when it looked like they were going to begin to get serious with each other, and that he was going to be willing to take on Damon's children and take on the family and take responsibility for them. But before but she was very hesitant, to go forward with that, but she had a dream. And in this dream, they were in a house, and they were looking out the glass window. She was looking out the glass window, and she saw a storm, a really bad storm, huge tornado, Oklahoma tornado, coming her way. And as she's looking out the window, watching the storm coming her way, Damon, her husband, who's dead, he comes out of the back of the house, the bedrooms. He comes up to her, and she looks at him, and she says, "What in the world are you doing here? You're dead." So he says, "Come with me." He takes her by the hand, and he leads her out into the garage to the storm shelter. And they have a storm shelter in their garage. So he takes her to the storm shelter. Well, in the storm shelter was Don. And Don had the two children with him in the storm shelter. And Damon took her hand and put it in Don's hand and told her, "He's going to take care of you now." So she went down into the storm shelter, but when she turned around to look at Damon and say, "Aren't you coming?" he said, "No, I have to go back." And she watched him disappear in a light, up, up, up. And that was her dream, and that was the dream that she took as confirmation that it was okay to go forward with Don to marry him. Now I'll show you another. This is one of my favorite photos. This is her and him on their honeymoon, and I love this picture because it's like he's grabbing her by the hand and pulling her back into life, because she has had an absolutely incredible life. She's been at death's door so many times, and then she loses her husband. She's been at death's door with her children. I've been at death's door with her. I mean, she's just a miracle. And now here he is grabbing a hold of her hand, and he's pulling her back into life, where it looked like she had absolutely no life left in her. So this is an incredible story, and he's been an absolutely amazing young man. He's been a wonderful father to my grandchildren. He's been a wonderful husband, and that's kind of that story. Now, Audrey, the little gal, my daughter, she got a disease when she was 10 years old. It was called idiopathic thrombos, I forget, ITP anyway, blood platelets. She would bleed on the inside of her blood veins couldn't hold the blood in, and she would just was black and blue from head to toe. Her platelet count went down to like 5, and that's where it would just continually stay low. And there, of course, that's when I found out that all the Shriners and all the health hospitals were not for people like us. And, because it cost thousands and thousands of dollars to give her a blood transfusion. But luckily I knew Jesus Christ, and I just trusted him. And that's what I've taught my children to do, is trust God. And God is very trustworthy. He brings us through life, through every situation, even when you come to death's door. And that's Audrey's story, part of it. Her conception was also a miracle conception, but I'll save that for another story.